This was a surprise that I was not expecting, at least at the time of announcement. John Romero decided to give back to the Doom fans and create a brand new, unofficial sequel episode to the Ultimate Doom simply called Sigil. It seems pretty obvious that it is actually a true sequel, but likely has to say unofficial since John isn't a part of id Software anymore. I'm not entirely sure, but that would be my best guess. So, back in around 2016, Mighty King Romero released E1M8B and E1M4B, both of which were his own personal recreations of the original Doom 1 episode maps. These were created with modern tools, but he wanted them to feel authentic and like they were really released in the 90s. So he limited the assets and the mechanics and whatnot to the original Doom. They gained tons of praise everywhere and probably hundreds of thousands of people messaging him, asking him if he would consider making a full episode of something similar to that. So we decided that he would do it. He wasn't too sure if it would be its own thing or not or whatever, but eventually he decided to make it a continuation of Die Flesh Consumed, episode 4 of the original game. While it was always planned to be a free WAD just like E1M8B and E1M4B, he wanted to do something special for this one and thought it would be cool to take a throwback to the 90s and make big boxes again. So that's exactly what he set out to do. John gave out hints quite a bit on his Instagram, almost all of them showing or hinting the number 5 in some way or form. Looking back, that was a pretty clear hint, but not very many people figured it out. Then, on Doom's 25th anniversary back on December 10th, he announced that he'd completed working on this huge additional episode for the Ultimate Doom and will release it sometime in February. But it was delayed till April, then delayed till May, and then finally out now due to production of the physical releases. And just wait for it. This WAD requires the original registered version of Doom or Ultimate Doom in order to be played, but just as planned is completely free. It includes 9 single-player maps and 9 deathmatch maps for a total of 18. Technically speaking, there's 9 specific maps, but he made it so that all of the multiplayer maps were a part of the single-player maps just in different spawn points. This was based on his idea on having different levels accommodate both single-player and multiplayer design, which is a genius idea in my humble opinion. Around the time Sigil was announced, there was a short 2-week time period that ended on Christmas Eve where you could have pre-ordered these physical copies in 2 different box versions, which is a huge treat to other collectors. If you were lucky enough to get them on time, or more specifically afford them, then this is what they would look like in person. And this has to easily be one of the most evil looking game covers I think I've ever seen. I've seen album covers, but I've never seen a game cover like this, and I just love it. If you know me at all, then I'm just a really dark person, not just literally, but I'm obsessed with everything dark and spooky and evil and all of that stuff. Really big on dark fantasy and medieval stuff and cyberpunk stuff and all of that. These bad boys went straight on my Doom altar, or, well, now my shelf because I was running out of space. They look so damn threatening and they're just perfect sitting there with their parents. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Big, massive thank you to my buddy Tom. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have gotten either of these. This means so much more to me than you or probably anyone else will understand, and I really can't give you enough of my thanks, man. I can't. These boxes will be cherished forever and will be a part of my little id Software Apogee museum. If you're also a collector like either of us, I think it's worth quickly noting that he's made a neat little site that I run with him called Vidgerp, which is comparable to a site like Discogs but much more in-depth and is for game collectors instead of music collectors, including big box PC games. It still has some work to be done, but it's pretty cool, so check it out if you have the time, or check out his YouTube channel of the same name. But yeah. So the first box was $40 and it was the standard big box with this sick ass cover. Nice and embossed just the way we nerds like it. Ugh. It's got no writing or anything on the front, just the artwork. All of the flaps, both sides and the top and bottom, all say Sigil. The back of the box says, "You're going straight to hell." I probably am. And a small description of Sigil. feel free to pause it if you'd like. The only thing I didn't really like about this box was that on the back there's no screenshots. Feels a little unfitting since the whole purpose of this was to relive the 90s, but whatever. It also comes with this beautiful shiny card inside of a shipping box, not the game box itself, which inside includes an ad of Christopher Lovell's orgasmically edgy artwork, I hope I pronounced that right, a Sigil and Romero Games sticker, this double jewel case which includes the Baphomet artwork on the front, the track list of Buckethead's soundtrack on the game on the back, yeah, you heard me right, I'll discuss that later, Buckethead's autobiography or something in the insert, the Baphomet artwork again in the back of the inlay, and one audio CD and one data DVD. And lastly, you'll get this kinda cool USB disguised as a 3.5-inch floppy disk when it's really not. A lot of people have had trouble trying to open this, but you just need to flip it like this. It's not very ideal, but it kind of works. This is definitely worth the asking price in my opinion, $40, and it fits nice and snug on PC game shelves. Though it's not as much of a beefy package as its unholy brethren. This other version was $166, and it was this big boy that made everyone want one, fittingly titled the Sigil Beast Box. I'm taking it straight out of the shipping box, so bear with me here. Oh man, look at that. Oh man. This... Wow. Look at that. Look at it! Look at it! This thing is freaking huge. It's also really heavy. I don't even know if I want to open it. It's rectangular and strong and sturdy and well built, and it feels like it was made with real quality. So you definitely get what you paid for. Not to mention it's also numbered and signed by the icon of Sin himself on the back. Beautiful. You also get a Sigil card that came with the shipping box, like the other version did. It looks a lot like the id anthology, which I'll probably show in a little bit. After watching me question my existence by opening this box, you'll see that inside it includes this gorgeous art print of Chris Lovell's Baphomet painting, signed by himself at the bottom over here, this XL-sized Sigil t-shirt, the same floppy as the other version, this really heavy and shiny Sigil coin, probably what a lot of people wanted this for, a little pewter figure of John's head on a spike, taken straight from the infamous end of Doom 2, the final boss and the same dude on the cover of the id anthology, which is Romero himself. Is this a coincidence? The lore is getting pretty deep. The same art ad and stickers as the last one, and this beautiful digibook thing, which I will again question my existence while proceeding to open. The book inside shows the development history of Sigil, some really neat photos and other stuff, and it's a pretty cool little addition to this package. And at the end, just like the anthology, it contains the discs. As far as the sizing goes, the original one is about the same size as the other Doom big boxes, so it fits really nicely with them on the shelf. It's not exact, but it's pretty damn close. The Beast box obviously sizes the same as the id anthology. Here's a comparison of some of the contents in case you wanted to see the similarities. Both of these packages feel absolutely worth the price, and one that, if you can find, I totally recommend getting. but only if you're a Doom fan or collector, because the WAD itself is 100% free to get directly from Romero Games, unless you get the version with Buckethead's music. The only way to purchase these boxes was directly from limited run games. Originally there was a set number of them that was going to be made, but after so many people were ordering it, it looked like they changed it from that to the 2-week time frame that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, that 2-week time frame was not enough for me to get $200. So Tom pretty much saved my life with this. I heard there might be some more standard boxes, so I recommend grabbing those if they do pop up. Otherwise, your only option, if you really want, is to find it somewhere in the collector's market. And with the assholes nowadays that overcharge on everything just because they can, all I can really say is I wish you the best of luck. All Doom fans deserve to have this in their collection. Once again, big thanks to Tom. This is just awesome that I have these for myself in my museum. It's really much appreciated, man. You're the best. If you want to see what comes on the Sigil discs, then here you go. Disc 1 has Buckethead's soundtrack, and both Disc 2 and the floppy have the exact same contents, a making of Sigil video, and the Sigil with a separate WAD containing Buckethead's soundtrack to be played in game. So if you aren't familiar with how Doom WADs work, after downloading the WAD or plopping in the flop and copying the WAD, you'll have to use a source port like GZ Doom or Crispy Doom or something in order to get the enhanced engine features that Sigil requires. You'll also need an iWAD file of the 1993 registered version of the first game, or an iWAD file of the Ultimate Doom. Chances are that you have the Ultimate Doom somewhere, being the one that Steam and GOG actively sell. These are located either on the physical discs or the installed directories as doom.wad and are very easy to find. Once you have that sorted out, you can go ahead and launch the game. And the beautiful artwork carries on in here too. Look at that. Same options and whatnot as all the other Doom games and WADs. Sadly, Sigil isn't a bunch of episodes, and instead it's one full episode, like I said earlier, but the levels are long, and I'll go over my thoughts overall in a sec. Regarding the story, as you know, this is sort of the continuation and spiritual sequel of episode 4 of Doom, Thy Flesh Consumed, and it picks up right where that one left off. Nothing too huge or in depth. Basically, at the end of E4M8, after killing the Spider Mastermind, your next stop is Earth, and your target is whatever the hell is creating these things, which we would later find out is the Icon of Sin, which is actually Baphomet, which is actually John Romero himself in Doom 2. Lore. But in this game, he glitched the final teleporter with his hidden sigil, whose power brings you much deeper down into hell. Then it's up to you from there to kill everything that moves. Or as I say, rip and tear.
Rip and tear, until it is done.
To then get him and kick his ass on Earth in Doom 2, even though it looks nothing like Earth, big jumbled mess, but whatever. As far as the graphics, they're really just dependent on what you set your resolution to, as with any of the other Doom games on the respective source port. The controls, enemies, weapons, and items are all exactly the same as the original Doom, nothing different. But what is different is both the levels themselves and the overall atmosphere, which is now cranked up even higher than Thy Flesh Consumed. A huge plus in my book, but maybe not as high as, say, Doom 64. The level names are also really fitting. Look at this. Baphomet's Domain. Yes, that word is domain. Cages of the Damned. Realm of Iblis. Abaddon's Void. Abaddon? Remember that asshole from Castlevania? He almost made me break my DS as a kid. The game's obviously the exact same as the Ultimate Doom, you know, this just being another WAD for it. This can be either a good or a bad thing depending on your view, and it means that there's no super shotgun, no chain gun zombies, thank f***, no pain elementals, no revenants, and no archviles. My biggest gripe about this is, of course, the lack of a super shotgun, but instead of Doom 2's higher difficulty with enemies, this ups the difficulty by not giving you the super shotgun and placing tons of enemies in tight corridors. There's also not much ammo scattered around throughout the maps, but if you do look and you do find the secrets, then you'll be fine. With that being said, the amount of enemies is significantly different between Hurt Me Plenty and Ultraviolence. You might want to take note of that, because if you're an active Doom player, the first thing you'll probably do is go and start the game on Ultraviolence, so just keep that in mind. Also, while there isn't any brand new enemies or bosses, there is a sort of specter looking lost soul thing. It seems to be a slightly harder to see version of the originals, but other than that, I couldn't notice any differences with it. At first, I thought this was something with the engine rendering them weird, but a lot of other lost souls look like they usually do, so I'm assuming that these were added, but I don't know for sure. Something new and exclusive to the Sigil episode is that it relies on a switch activating mechanic to progress. These are these green eyes that you've been seeing around in the head levels. Unlike the rest of the entire original Doom series, these things actually have a purpose now. Once you shoot these, they open a door, a bridge, or a platform or whatever to progress through. Also now, instead of hitting switches or walking into pentagrams, you have to walk into these Baphomet tapestries to end the level, those of which were pure decoration in all the other classic Dooms. While I really enjoyed this episode overall, I do think there were a few kind of dumb choices. There's an area or two with lava pits that you can't escape, others with really cheaply placed enemies and traps, albeit on Ultraviolence when there's like cyber demons and ridiculous stuff like that, and one level with a shit ton of these crusher things that kill you instantly. Another thing that really annoyed me was a section on the same level of those crushers, where you find a slot to insert a red, blue, and yellow key to lower the rails. The yellow key is the one that you have to find, but there's no blue or red keys here. So after like 30 or 40 minutes of looking around the map 5 times, I tried hitting the color switches even though I didn't have the keys, and bam, they worked. They should not be color coded if none of those keys are in the level. I'm sure Romero did this just to be a dick, but like, come on man, that's a cheap move. This, plus those crushers, I was not a fan of this level. Everything else in the level was admittedly kinda cool, but the crushers and the stupid key thing pissed me off pretty bad. I guess it was done to make the game more challenging and increase the longevity, but it's still pretty dumb. Also, I think more levels should have been made for this instead of making the cheap-ass death traps. But aside from that stuff, the rest of the game wasn't really a big deal to me, just little dumb things for me to nitpick at. With that being said, the overall level design, aside from being obnoxiously dark and hard to see most of the time, is awesome. And yes, you can turn up the brightness, but you have to turn it up to the point where it feels gross in order to see a damn thing and it kinda kills the atmosphere. So I just felt like keeping it at the default and prevented myself from making my eyes bleed. I also thought this was a rendering issue, but changing the renderer didn't make a difference at all with the lighting for me for some reason. Am I going full retard? But yeah, there's tons of attention to detail. All of the levels are very carefully crafted, and the way the levels look are beautiful. Job well done on those. Except for the f***ing god-awful crusher. I've seen a lot of people bashing Sigil, most likely because people saw G-Man's review and decided that's the opinion they want to go with without playing it for themselves. Reminds me of another review I saw on Blood Fresh Supply. Don't do that. It's so stupid and irritating to see someone bash or praise something without even playing it. Just don't do that. Even if you're sitting here watching this, don't go telling people that this is the best WOD ever created just because I'm sitting here saying it's well made. Play it for yourself and get your own opinion. The whole reason I make these videos is to catch someone's interest with the game and make them either try it themselves or avoid it like the plague. Thankfully the latter of which I haven't had to do yet, but probably will soon. I always make it a point to sit through whatever I'm making a review on from start to finish in order to get my own opinion and what I think a general audience would feel, no matter what it is, regardless of who says what on it. The thing with Sigil that I feel like a lot of people just don't seem to understand for whatever reason is that you have to go into this thing with the right mindset and understand that this was an attempt to make this as a follow-up to Thy Flesh Consumed, as it would have been in the 90s. Not some modern WoD, not some Doom 2 continuation, none of that. It was trying to be as pure and faithful to the original game as much as possible, and whether you like Sigil or not, that's definitely what it succeeds with. How about the difficulty? It's unfair, it's terrible, enemy placement, oh boo-hoo, difficulty. No. That was also made with a very valid reason. This is a continuation. You see, I don't know if you've noticed, but games in the early 90s were always split into a couple of episodes, usually 3. Doom did that too, and each episode got harder and more difficult as it went on. Playing the game on Ultra Violence, episode 1 is a breeze, episode 2 is a breeze with some tricky moments here and there. Episode 3 was a pretty good challenge, but it was still doable. Episode 4 made you grow hair on your balls if you could finish it on Ultra Violence. And Sigil, well, Sigil's its own thing in terms of difficulty. At least when you play on Ultra Violence or Nightmare. It's not just some challenge anymore, it's a f***ing feat. But that's also part of what makes it fun. You feel like you accomplished something when you finally beat it. My personal favorite maps would probably have to be maps 3, 5, 7, and 9, the secret level. And my least favorite would easily have to be map 4. Crush. The secret level is actually pretty difficult to find since you have to be in a very specific spot. I'll show you, but if you don't want to watch this and figure it out for yourself, just skip to this timestamp.
What are you waiting for? Christmas?
Still watching? Okay. So in map 6, when you get to this crazy teleporter room, you have to keep going and going until you're in the second to last area, right here. And then you have to shoot this eye right here in this crack. If you're even a mere 2 or 3 steps away from the spot, you'll miss it completely. Once you shoot it, it'll open a hidden room that you find by continuing to walk through the teleporters. And then, in the hidden room, you walk into this candle-surrounded Baphomet tapestry on the floor, which will bring you into the secret level. It's a pretty cool level. It's not an amazing one by any means, but it is a fun little challenge, and like I mentioned earlier, it's probably one of the more enjoyable ones. Although it feels a little more like a level from Inferno, rather than Thy Flesh Consumed or the rest of Sigil. As far as the sound and music, the sound is pretty much all the same, but the music this time around comes in 2 different flavors. A MIDI soundtrack done by James Paddock, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. I'm sorry. Forgive me. And a real soundtrack done by legendary guitarist Buckethead. Let's start with Buckethead. Now, honestly speaking, I love some of his songs, and the dude is one of the most talented bastards I've ever seen wield a guitar. Although his music can be really repetitive, he's considered one of the greatest guitarists of all time for a pretty legit reason. But I was really skeptical when I heard that he was doing the soundtrack for Sigil. I really wondered, will it feel like Doom? How will it sound? What songs will be used? All of that stuff. Suffice to say, I was actually pretty blown away by the soundtrack. Some of the tracks were ambient to enhance the atmosphere, and others were something you'd probably expect from Buckethead. Most of the tracks on here were great, but to be honest, some of them felt a little too soft, I guess is the word. At least for something like Doom. Go ahead and take a listen for yourself. I don't think this is something you would listen to when you're literally in the deepest pits of hell slaying demons. It needs more aggression and more darker, harsher sounding tunes. It's still pretty good overall, but really I think it might be a better experience to check it out before playing the game. If you like it and you want to go support the Romeros and Buckethead but didn't get a chance to grab the physical releases in time, you can go to Romero Games and buy the WAD with the Buckethead soundtrack for 6.66 euros. True cult. If you download the free WAD, it comes with the MIDI soundtrack by James that I, honest to God, feel surpasses Buckethead's quite a bit, at least in the terms of feeling Doom. You can call me a retard over this all you want, but James's MIDIs are much more fitting for something like this. I love both of the soundtracks overall, but I would say for playing the game use James's MIDIs, so just the regular Sigil WAD by itself, and for random listening or something to chill out to or whatever, go check out Buckethead's. But James's though. Lastly, I can't talk about Doom without talking about the multiplayer. A big mistake I made on my classic Doom retrospective. There's the 9 or so multiplayer exclusive maps, or areas, each which are all very solid and well designed. I don't play Doom multiplayer as much as I want to, but I played through a majority of these with my retro gaming buds, and we all had a blast playing through every single map. Absolutely stellar stuff, to say the very least. I myself will definitely be playing these maps for quite some time to come. I've played all of them but 1 or 2 of them maybe, and can say with confidence that each of the maps that we played are well designed for a varied number of players. I think 3 to 5 for each map would be a perfect amount of people, but there's some of them that you can tell are designed for a little bit more people. You can tell by some of this footage that they get pretty damn wild. At first, we were a little confused on how to start these up, but if you remember earlier in the video, I said that these are basically the single player maps with certain spawn points. Although there is ways to open up these levels and do deathmatch on the single player levels, which is still pretty cool because even when going on the single player parts of the maps, they're still really fun to play in deathmatch. That's not something I could say for very many other things at all, because it never happened. The last thing I wanted to talk about was getting this game to work in plain old vanilla Doom. Like I said towards the beginning of this video, this episode was only designed to be run on a source port which has the enhanced features that Sigil apparently requires. No, you can't get this working on DOS Doom, but I did try using it on my Windows 98 on Doom 95 and it worked. It worked! It does have some graphical issues and the music didn't work, the MIDI at least, but it worked. It worked! This isn't some random fan-made source port. This is the official Windows version of Doom. This is the real deal. And if you are playing it on here, I bow in honor because this is as vanilla Doom as you're probably ever gonna get without DOS. So overall, I think you should definitely make it a point to play Sigil. The entire thing was made by the one and only John Romero, and you can clearly tell because of how solid the maps are designed and how well the levels progress. Aside from map 4, because of those stupid ass crushers, the atmosphere in Sigil is some of the best in Doom overall, and it's a really solid pack of levels where it matters most, both in single player and deathmatch. There are some frustrating moments to take note of, and you really have to go into this with an open mind and think, hey, this came out in 1995 right after Thy Flesh Consumed, in order to truly enjoy it the way it was meant to be played. Finding a physical copy now after the limited run will probably be a thorn up your ass, and you'll probably have to pay an arm and a leg due to the shitty scalpers out there, or wait years before somebody even considers selling theirs. Although the WAD by itself is completely free, so unless you don't have a copy of Doom for whatever reason, which you already should have by now, then you can go and grab that thing for free and play it yourself right now. Rip and f***ing tear.